Welcome to the Hill Update. I'm your host, Dean Allison. It's now been more than 14 months since the COVID-19 pandemic was declared. It's certainly been a very difficult time for all of us and difficult for many different reasons. For those of us who are looking forward to a somewhat normal summer, that's probably not going to happen. It looks like many of the restrictions will still be in place until at least the fall. Restrictions that prevent our spending time with friends, family, and loved ones for more than a year are causing devastating impact on Canadians' mental health. Today, I'd like to talk to you about this, the current mental health crisis caused in large part by the pandemic. Recently, the Angus Reid, on behalf of the United Way, conducted a poll on mental health of Canadians. The data showed that 76% of respondents said that the pandemic had caused stress, anxiety, or depression. Another poll conducted by KPMG indicated that half of Canadians, over 54%, say their mental health has suffered over the past year. That's an incredibly concerning statistic, especially its potential for long-term issues. The decline is more pronounced in people who are unemployed due to COVID at 61%. Those with pre-existing mental health conditions, those aged 18 to 24, students, and those that have a disability at 47%. Earlier this year, the CEO of the Canadian Mental Health Association for the Ontario Division said this on the subject. It's very worrying to see the trend lines on mental health of Ontarians decreasing as significantly as they have since our last poll. She went on to say that as service providers, it's very alarming to think about what we'll need to do to support the population. The service demands will be very significant. She also went on to say that a lot of people will struggle in the aftermath of the pandemic because they will be coming to terms with what they've lost. And that, for a lot of people, it will be anxiety-provoking to go back to the regular routine. Currently, many Canadians across the country are scrambling to find counseling. Social workers are working overtime. More women are reporting mental health concerns, while men are reporting issues with substance addictions. Domestic violence reports have gone up. Women are bearing the brunt of COVID-19 and have disproportionately been affected by the pandemic, mental health included. Parents are reporting an increased amount of anxiety, especially amongst their school-age children. Suicide rates in our society are complex. However, societal thoughts and feelings in the general population remain elevated at 8%, compared to 6% in the spring of 2020 and 10% in the fall of 2020, substantially higher than the 2.5% observed pre-pandemic in 2016. The reality is, we are not just looking at a mental health anxiety and people thinking about taking their lives. We are also having people mask that through other things such as alcohol, opioids, and hard drugs. We are no doubt in a mental health crisis. Will our patchwork of services be able to meet the challenge of this crisis? It doesn't look like it so far. Recognizing this crisis, my colleague in the House of Commons, Todd Doherty, introduced a motion in Parliament that calls on the government to take immediate action to establish a national suicide prevention hotline that consolidates all suicide crisis numbers into one easy-to-remember three-digit hotline, 988. That is accessible to all Canadians. Mr. Doherty is hoping that members of Parliament can come together and pass this motion as soon as possible, given its importance, not just during the pandemic, but after it as well. As for myself, I recently contributed to mental health efforts by sponsoring a petition initiated by Steven Soos. Petition E3351 calls for the House of Commons to launch a study in the Standing Committee on Health on the merits of declaring a national emergency on mental health. Today on my show, I have Mr. Steven Soos, who is going to talk about the petition and the mental health crisis that we are currently in. Steven Soos is the host of True Politics and also a huge champion for mental health issues. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the things he's been involved in locally, some of the suggestions he has for us in government, as well as business and other individuals as well, and just ways that we can be a little bit more in tune with what's going on with mental health in and around our communities. So when we come back, we're going to be welcome Steven Soos to talk more about the mental health crisis that we are experiencing right now in this country. We'll see you when we come back from break. Joining me on the show today is the host of True Politics, Steve Soos. Steve, thanks for joining me on the show today. I know you have been a huge champion for mental health. Talk to us a bit about why the commitment. I mean, we'll talk about some of the things you've been doing, but why such the champion for mental health in particular?
Yes, thank you for having me on the show, Dean. I'm sure you're getting me back for the 2 times you've been on True Politics. I'm such a big advocate for mental health because I've worked in that field. I have lived experience, and I have family members who struggle and friends who struggle with mental health. So it's very much a personal issue for me. I see how it affects the community, and I just want to do my part to assist. And that's why Councillor Wayne Campbell and I originally co-authored a motion for Niagara Region to declare a state of emergency on mental health, homelessness, and addiction. This was supported by 11 out of 12 of Niagara's local area municipalities. And ultimately, Dean, it was turned down the region, which I'm extremely disappointed in.
So you've taken a great example of how somebody can champion an issue locally. I mean, this is obviously a national issue. We'll talk about the national piece in a second. But as far as championing it locally, tell us why you decided to speak to local councils and what you were hoping to accomplish as a result of getting them to pass the motion that, quite frankly, mental health needs to be considered a crisis at this point in time.
Excellent question. And I've always viewed politics as grassroots, and municipal politics is a passion of mine because it's the level of politics closest to the people. I feel that talking to the councils is a great way to build awareness. And it's better to have the councils also advocating through endorsement motions than just me as Steven Soos saying, let's do this. When you have the councils behind you with the representing the majority of the population of Niagara, it's a much stronger call to action than if I was just simply saying it.
So we'll talk about what's actually going on in Niagara around the country in our next segment. But for now, right now, so you've raised the issue with all municipalities. There's 12 of them in Niagara, including the region, which would be 13, the one that I want to say overrules, but it's the overarching region of Niagara. Talk to me about what you're hoping. Are you hoping maybe, obviously awareness is a big issue, but are you hoping they'll spend resources or add resources to it? What are some of the things that you've been encouraging them to do?
Absolutely. So it's about procurement of resources. So the original motion was about calling on the provincial government to allocate more resources to the issues of mental health, homelessness, and addiction, a system that is underfunded by $1.5 billion. Now we have federal petition 3351, E3351, which of course you supported as MP for Niagara West. And now we want to take it to the national spotlight, and we want to launch a study on the merits of declaring a national emergency in the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health.
That's great. Now, what are you hoping to accomplish through the study? Lots of things going on, and the Health Committee is the right place for that study. So what are you hoping that they'll be able to figure out? They're going to, through going through the process of a study, are you hoping they're going to figure out how tremendously underfunded it is, specific things that maybe they could do? You're hoping they're going to talk to experts in the field. What are some of the things that you're hoping that study would uncover?
Absolutely, Dean. It's all of the above, especially the fact that we want this issue looked at by national experts. This is a situation that is dire right now. I take Kids Help Phone, for example. Pre-pandemic, they had 1.9 million use. And now that has shot up to 4 million people accessing the Kids Help Phone. So we need to look at situations like crisis lines, more support for those crisis lines, more staffing for those crisis lines. I'd also like to see community navigators in the system, because the social services specifically is a very hard system to navigate. I've done it myself, and it is extremely difficult to get to where you need to go. And there's a lot of red tape involved. And when it's underfunded, and when there's not a lot of, when there's not enough staff allocated to the service, the end user suffers. So we want to look at those issues. We want to look at, how can we improve the services for the end user? How can we get people the help that they need now, not 6 months from now, not a year from now, not 2 years from now, Dean?
Well, being in government for the last 17 years, I can assure you that navigating the system is not simple the best of times. And so I think that you're bang on. People don't actually know where to go for help. When we come back after break, let's talk a bit about what's going on the ground in terms of the need when we come back. Welcome back to the Hill Update. Joining me on the show today is Steve Soos, the host of True Politics and a real champion for mental health. Okay, Steve, just before the break, we were talking about the need and how do we navigate the system. Let's get right into what's going on around the country. You did mention a few stats before. Why don't we start with Niagara, and then maybe we could feather it out from there in terms of what you're hearing, what you're seeing in terms of the need for mental health help. It could be addictions. Just give us what your perception of the lay of the land is.
Yeah, absolutely, Dean. So I want to look to Niagara because, I'm from Welland and, it's a place close to my heart. Of course, the issue and the petition mental health affects all Canadians from all walks of life. But I will go into the specifics about Niagara. And in Niagara, the suicide rate alone is higher than the provincial average. We have a suicide rate of 9.9 per 100,000, whereas the province is 7.7 per 100,000. In terms of self-harm, the rate is higher, again, in Niagara compared to the provincial average. We have the situation of youth hospitalizations. There was a CBC article regarding McMaster that youth hospitalizations as a result of suicide ideation and mental health has tripled, which is unprecedented. So that is a huge issue as well. And that's a little too close to home for me, Dean. And more damning for the young people are that 14% of secondary students in Niagara have reported that they have seriously considered suicide. And that's actually listed right on the Niagara Regional website, that stat.
So, and I have another article here as well that just talks about that. It said in some circumstances, emissions for substance use disorders have increased by 200%. You talked about suicide attempts. It goes on to say that over 70% of children ages 6 to 18 have said this pandemic has hurt their mental health. So let's talk about it. You feel that obviously there's always been issues around mental health, and you've been a champion for some time, but I guess what I'm asking you, it seems to me like this pandemic has only intensified the need and and highlighted the fact that we've got a major issue around mental health.
You're totally right about that, because right in the motion for the petition when I was authoring it, I note a recent Morneau Shepherd poll that says that 50% of Canadians report that their mental health has worsened under COVID-19. And this is a consequence of continuous lockdowns. So the thing is here, it is very much a national issue, and it's alarming to see that rate. And when you have in Niagara the situation, beforehand the system was already underfunded. Beforehand there was a mental health emergency as well, but now COVID-19 has just exacerbated it. You take that and you add the lack of services in some area municipality hospitals because of centralization. This has become a recipe for disaster, Dean.
I got two questions. We got about 2 minutes left on this segment. So talk to me. It seems to me like there's almost a disproportionate amount of young people that are struggling. So I'm guessing that lockdowns, isolation, and all these things have really played havoc on young people's minds.
Yes, and I think that's as a result of school closures, because people can't interact with their friends. They don't see their friends on a daily basis, and that's really affected them from kindergarten and up all the way to high school. That is the consistent concern, and that's outlined in a lot of media, national media, where kids are saying, we don't have access to our friends. We can't see them. They can't rely on the relationships that they've had. They're isolated, and parents are suffering as well. They're having a hard time with the mental health, and I've lived it. I suffer from anxiety and depression, and I certainly know the feeling of feeling isolated, and it is not a good feeling to be.
We have about 40 seconds left. Talk to me about some of the supports. And that's probably one of the biggest issues. Not only do people not know how to access them, but there's really just not a lot out there.
Yes, the supports are important. I would like to see more of them, but if anyone needs to reach out for a crisis line, you have Coast Niagara, and they're at 1-866-550-5205. If you're looking for immediate response team, you're going to push 1. If you're looking for a referral for mental health and addictions, you're going to press 2. Leave a message at the answering service. I know it's not the perfect system. We have the Stress Center Niagara, which is very good. If you want to have a longer conversation, there's urgent support services. Again, you can access them by calling Coast, and they try to set up a counselor immediately.
Okay, when we come back, let's talk more about that. Welcome back to the Hill Update. Joining me on the show today is Steve Soos. Steve, thanks for joining us. As we go into the last segment, now we've talked about some of the issues and concerns we have. Let's now talk the final segment, what more can we do? We look at some of these things. I love the fact you talk about navigating the system. The system can be complicated. So let's talk about what we can do as individuals. First of all, is there more we can do? Sometimes it's awareness, sometimes it's paying attention to people in our lives. Let's start with that, and then we'll move to businesses and government.
100%. As individuals, I think it's important to check in on people. We often don't realize that somebody could be hurting because, depression doesn't always come with a frown. Oftentimes it actually comes with a smile. So we want to check in on people and ask how they're doing. I know it's difficult with lockdown, so reaching out to people on social media is a great way. Active listening is the key. Listen to people, what they have to say, listen to what they're going through, and just offer to be a supportive ear. And that's what I try to do every day. I don't ignore people. I try to reach out to as many people as I can and just ask them how they're doing. As individuals, I think that's so important, Dean.
Well, you got, like you said, you got social media, you got texting, you've got the pick up the phone. They're all some pretty basic things. But you're right. If you haven't been talking to people, there's no way that you would know possibly that people are hurting because people always don't like to admit it either. So you're right. Listening to what they're saying or what they're not saying. Let's talk about what businesses can do. Is there more that businesses can do to try and deal with the whole issue around mental health?
Yes, and before I get into the businesses, I just want to say another thing that individuals can do is sign petition E3351. It takes 30 seconds of your time, and that is a way that you can contribute to getting this study on a national emergency for mental health. Dean, in terms of business, I had a great initiative going through change.org, and that was for employee wellness boards, mental health boards. We have workplace safety boards, we have union boards. If you're a unionized business, we should have mental health boards in the hospital, in the small businesses when they get to open back up. And what the government could do, what the city halls can do and the town halls can do, they can put up an employee wellness board and have their employees contribute to it and be leaders in that and and I'm all for creating a network of business owners for mental health as well. Creating a network where business owners can share their struggles and their challenges. I don't know if that'd be done through the town or as a private venture, but I think that's also a great idea.
Excellent. And finally, what would you recommend the government do? We're talking about some of these things. Any other things that government could look at?
Absolutely. And privately as well, with the help of April Jeffs in 2019, I actually hosted the first mental health addictions and homelessness town hall in Welland, and we continued it Niagara-wide virtually just recently. So that's another great thing. Businesses could help put on events for these type of things and town halls and talking to people. In terms of the government, again, I wish the region would have accepted that we have a mental health, homelessness, and addiction emergency. They didn't. I think that's the way to go. I think we need to support that venture because it's the way to say this is a problem and we need more resources, staff, and services procured to it. That is what I'm fighting for here, and that's what I truly believe the government should do. And I love that we have our lower tier municipalities as partners assisting us in trying to push the federal government for this. But remember, Dean, you know, as an MP, the majority of the role the feds can do is transfer the healthcare funds to the province. The province should be the ones improving the mental health care system, and the municipalities should be the ones in collaboration with local stakeholders improving the services on the ground.
Perfect. Steve, thank you very much for coming in today. We'll look forward to hearing more about this in the future. We had a great example today of what you could do to get involved locally on any particular issue. We had Steve on talking about his involvement with local town councils. One great bit of advice I think we can all follow is check in with people. This has been a particularly hard time for a lot of individuals, families, and young people. What you can do is pick up the phone, send a text, and ask how people are doing. I'm Dean Allison, and thanks for joining me this week on The Hill Update.